there's still a mountain of circumstantial evidence that I've chosen to keep private for years. And I just feel like I'd be remiss like not sharing that, with the world.
It's the PokerNews Podcast.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 1004 of the PokerNews Podcast presented by WPT Global. I am Chad Holloway, joined by Mike Holtz and a very special guest for the entire episode, Garrett Adelstein. Garrett, thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, of course. Pumped to do this, Chad.
Yeah, it's exciting because in about a week as we're recording this, that book that is right behind you, Beneath the Cards, is going to be released. I've read it. I got an advanced copy so I could do a review on Poker News, which will come out at the same time as the book. But that's what we're going to talk a lot about this episode, and you got to be pretty stoked. I know this has been in the works for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I really am thrilled. We're recording this just a few days before, and I'm also really nervous at this point. I think it's all kind of, hitting ahead. Like as much as I've done all I can, I think sort of therapeutically to sort of protect myself emotionally, there's only so much you can do. I've just poured my heart and soul into this for the last 4 years, and, it's not mine anymore. It's for the rest of the world. And so I'm thrilled, but nervous as well. So
well, take us back then 4 years ago. Like, what inspired you to do this project, to do this book?
Yeah, I think what a lot of people don't know is sort of the tumultuous up and down relationship I've had with poker, throughout my career. Before September 2022, I already, had become pretty disillusioned with poker. And my long-term plan was always to make enough money to leave the game, honestly, or kind of have it take the sort of role that it has in the last 4 years, where I'm essentially a recreational player playing a couple times a year, and whatever happens. High stakes poker is just incredibly stressful, and it had just taken its toll on me. And at the time, my wife was several months pregnant, and I just wasn't sure what role I wanted high stakes poker to have in my life, as a father, and in that phase of my life. And then Jack 4 happened, and it all kind of just like rolled together because, man, I had never felt less passion for poker than after that went down. I just was really low on poker and really fearful of being sort of in the public eye. And, so I knew I needed a different way to spend my time. And it was actually my therapist and my wife who were like, you got to start writing some of this down for therapeutic reasons. Cause I'll admit, like I was in a pretty dark place, after Jack 4. I wish it wasn't true, but like sort of all of the firestorm and all of the attention that was on me, a lot of it not so positive, in the weeks and months after, was tough. So that was kind of the genesis of writing. And maybe after 3 or 6 months of that was when, I started sort of sharing some pages with my wife and a couple close advisors, and they're like, you have to publish a memoir. Like, you have something really special here. And for the last 3.5 years, it's just been like full steam ahead, like, Chad, you've read, like, I'm a pretty obsessive person. And so that mindset certainly did not shift as I crafted the book.
I'm curious with you, Mike, real quick, because we weren't doing the show together. We didn't really know each other super well when the Jack 4 situation took place. I remember it from my perspective, but, you were playing, you were grinding online. What did you remember about that whole incident? What was life like for you then?
Oh, man. When that happened, it was like the craziest shit ever. I didn't watch it live, but I was like playing a session online, doing my thing, and then I went on Twitter, and it was like legitimately 85% of tweets were something to do with that. So I immediately was like, what the hell's going on? Checked into the whole thing. I've been on Garrett's side the whole time. You know what I mean? Very sketchy, weird situation that happened there. Obviously gigantic for the poker world. I mean, it's crazy. It's the biggest scandal in streaming history for poker.
Yeah. And speaking of the social media aspect, Garrett, I know that was part of something I've seen you address in the past. Like, I'm sure you were glued to the social media in the aftermath, but eventually you kind of had to unplug from that, right? Yeah.
I wish again, that wasn't the case. I have a lot of things I kind of wish I could have done differently. But yeah, after Jack 4, it's like I read, it seems like every comment, like every single video, and I mean, Mike, as you talked about, I mean, we're talking about like hundreds of assets, thousands of comments per asset. Like, it became like a part-time job for me, just reading people like troll me, hate on me or whatever online, which is just like obviously my responsibility to log off, but I just couldn't do it, at that time. And yeah, it definitely, affected me more than it should. And I've now taken sort of years to process, reflect, and hopefully, there's going to be obviously a lot of attention, again, with the book. A lot of people are hyper focused specifically on the evidentiary aspects of it. And, those on Team Robbi to oversimplify, they're not, I assume, all of a sudden going to just like flip and, start cheerleading for me. So it very much will be my responsibility to take the feedback in stride and make sure I'm sort of, protecting my mental health, getting outside, spending time with my family, things of that nature, because obviously like I'm bringing this on myself. I could have let Jack 4 die. Like I didn't need to write a memoir, etc. So, I need to own that, and I do.
I think that just real fast, I think that the people defending Robbi, I think I also, Chad shared it with me yesterday, the advanced copy. So I got to read at least the Jack 4 section and the first like 75 pages. And sure. I think there might be a switch from a lot of the Robbi fans, the Robbi believers out there, because you lay forth some stuff, and obviously we won't get into the exact specifics to spoil the book, but very, very compelling things.
Yeah, well, Mike, I really appreciate you saying that. I think that's really sort of just been my approach with all of this. I think there's a pretty minuscule thread I'm trying to needle here, right? Because I've had to work really hard to sort of make peace with what happened in Jack 4 and find sort of the silver linings and the lessons. But also, Mike, to your point, like there's still a mountain of circumstantial evidence that I've chosen to keep private for years. And I just feel like I'd be remiss, like not sharing that, with the world. And so I know there's a lot of skeptics out there, a lot of people who, this is a very passionate issue for people. Let's call it what it is. Like for a lot of people, they're viewing, whether they realize it or not, Jack 4 like religion and politics. Like they picked a side and they defend it to the death. The first short story I released with the book, did over 5 million views for a reason. Like people are very passionate about this stuff. And so it's just my responsibility to just like lay out all of the evidence, and people can do what they want. And, if certain people still feel strongly Robbi didn't cheat or whatever, like, we're good. Like I have no hard feelings with them. I just want to put the information out there and let people decide. And I think on that note, I think it's at least worth mentioning too. Like everyone's like, oh, like Garrett, like is holding all this back, putting it behind a paywall, like, because he's trying to make money. That's just a very misguided sort of thought process. For one, the profit ceiling on a book is remarkably low. If I wanted to make money, I would have spent the last 4 years playing high stakes poker. But I think even more to that point, my editing team is working around the clock behind the scenes to put all of the evidentiary aspects, and only the evidentiary aspects. So the rest of the Jack 4 story and narrative, let alone the rest of the book, none of that will be in the video, but specifically the evidence, the stuff that you guys read in the appendices, that's going to be available for free in video form, by the end of 2026. So I'm not like to me, the most important thing is that the information is out there to the world, to anyone who cares, and people can make of it what they will.
One of the things that's really difficult with situations and scandals like this is it's not as clear cut, right? Unless you catch somebody red-handed with a swap deck or something like that, it's really hard, because there's always that little bit of doubt in the back of some people's minds. I mean, even with Mike Possel's situation, there are some people in that. Was that, from your perspective in dealing with the Jack 4 situation, a frustration, if you will? Because like you said, this was a very polarizing, very divisive situation where you had people on your side, people on Robbi's side. I would imagine from your perspective that was probably pretty frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard, but I did myself no favors. I mean, let's call it what it is, like, I mean, I could go on and on, but obviously the first and most obvious one is like that tweet I put out hours after the hand, which was not well thought out. I refused to like check with any advisors. My wife told me don't do it, did it anyway. So, like the venom in my direction, like to me, it makes a lot of sense, and I think more specifically, a lot of times like issues like this are really sort of like a mirror to people's own lives, and I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but like for those who, I guess to oversimplify, like supported me, like if you had been cheated in a poker home game yourself, you were very likely to side with me, right? And there were some people and their sort of thought processes or their experiences in life that probably led them to why they sided with Robbi. And this is why you're never gonna convince anyone. And Chad, as you pointed out, like without a smoking gun, and this elusive smoking gun is nearly impossible to find in any sort of poker cheating controversy. Without that, like you're never going to convince anyone, or sorry, you're never going to convince everyone. And I need to be cool with that, and I am cool with that. And again, this is why like I would never have written a memoir about Jack 4. I would have never written like a memoir like trying to prove to the world that Robbi and company cheated. I think that would have been a really boring book. And yet Jack 4 itself is part of my story. And so it does make up 1/10 of the book. And again, I just feel like I'd be remiss not to give the reader, all of the evidence. And so that's why it's kind of cleanly tucked into the appendices for the many people who don't care about sort of the whodunit aspects. They don't even have to touch the appendices.
I'm glad you mentioned it because it's a good segue. I was going to say that the book isn't just about Jack 4 and that whole situation. Like you said, maybe 10% of it. There is a whole memoir there about you and your life story and your family and your history in poker and things like that. So what, those who are listening to this, watching this, who might not have pre-ordered the book, which you should. I pre-ordered it back in March when you first announced this thing. But what else can they expect in this book, Beneath the Cards?
Yeah, I mean, a lot, a lot of everything. I would say the spine of the book is really the narrative. I've lived a really insane professional life. Just playing poker for millions of dollars, the most bizarre, crazy characters, compulsive gamblers, being cheated in a couple other poker home games, in the past, wild, degenerate gambling stories. I think the sort of stoic, composed guy that a lot of people maybe associate with from my live stream career, I think they'll probably be pretty surprised to realize like what a degenerate I was, how many sort of life leaks I had throughout my career, and more specifically, sort of just like the depression I lived with, throughout my life, and trying to make a career in high stakes poker, work with that. For those sort of poker junkies, there's definitely a lot in there about mindset and sort of how I think a lot of lessons, I guess, that I had to sort of learn the hard way a lot of times over and over again, that not only I think can make you a better, more balanced poker player, but far more relevantly, sort of make you a more even-keeled person, who's able to live with a lot more peace. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have it all figured out or that like I've completely beat depression. The reality is something as tricky as that. You don't beat it, you battle it one day at a time. And I think, I've made a lot of strides, in that way, but you don't really know until you're really tested, until shit hits the fan. And I thought I kind of had things figured out at 36 when Jack 4 happened. And man, I quickly realized I most certainly did not.
Well, it was about you, Mike, that I wanted to do to kind of segue into this is because when you learned that we were having Garrett on the show, you got excited and messaged me that, 7 years ago, back in 2019, long before this ever happened, you actually reached out to Garrett kind of along the lines. You were talking depression. Yours was more about anxiety. I don't know what you want to share about that, but I think it's, a good time.
No, I'm completely comfortable sharing the entire thing. I had watched you on Joey Ingram's podcast in 2019, and I didn't become a professional poker player until 2021. I mean, I was attempting it in 2019 in cash, but I wasn't very good. And your podcast and what you said about anxiety and depression really resonated with me, and I'd sent you a message and just basically said like, hey man, I just wanted to say I appreciated it and everything. And you sent me back a really heartfelt message, and I was a nobody at the time, like nobody knew who I was. So I just thought that was really, really cool. And then I sent you one back when I won Player of the Year in 2021, just to say like, hey man, like crazy fucking world, you know what I mean? So it is wild how it could come full circle. And I think one of the interesting things reading the book and knowing your backstory from Joey's podcast was that I think that anxiety and your upbringing, I think like the way that you talked about your parents and or getting into weightlifting at 13 and just like throwing yourself into it to quell the anxiety. I think that's like a huge part of what makes you a great poker player. I think it's probably what gives you your live reads and your ability to read people and read micro expressions and etc. So I just think the whole thing's fascinating. And yeah, man, thanks for everything.
Yeah, of course. No worries. I think, one of the things I touch on at several points in the book, especially after a couple of the bigger chapters, with Neverwin and CB, where, I won millions in each of those games. There were some really dark moments in between, which sounds ridiculous. And I'm sure a lot of people are like, boo-hoo, like rich white guy feels sad after winning millions, but a lot of soul searching, a lot of sort of tough moments, like wondering, was I doing the right thing? Sort of winning this kind of money from people who clearly had, issues with gambling and just the zero-sum nature of poker. It's not my job to judge it. And let's be honest, like I've, made my money doing that exact thing. But interviews like that, Mike, and being able to talk with you, and I was kind of blown away when I gave my email address at the end of that interview. I mean, hundreds of people reached out, and it was just incredibly rewarding to be able to, I guess, use that small platform to be able to take this zero-sum sort of career and turn it into a positive. And the only reason I even really bring that up is because that's in many ways really the catalyst for the book. It's like, like how much money is enough, like how much sort of stress and anxiety of high stakes poker is enough. And I was really searching for something different, and I think that's what the book has really given me. Ultimately, when I write a paragraph or a chapter over and over and over again, and I feel like I get it just right, I mean, that's about the most powerful feeling in the world. It's a feeling that studying Pio Sims can never touch. So
one of the things I enjoyed about your book and just about you in general and your story is, and it's something that I relate to right now because it's been about 5 months now since I've had any alcohol, which is by far the longest I've went in decades. I'm on a health kick right now, getting in shape. I'm under 200 pounds for the first time since my early 20s. And I know these things have been big priorities for you. And, I take some inspiration from that, even though I got to say, like, I'm a big Survivor fan. And obviously remember your time on Survivor. Who goes in there with whatever you had, 3% body fat? That was always funny to me.
Like we said, Chad, like the book is more often a cautionary tale than a how-to guide, including with Survivor.
I do want to ask that real quick, just for my own curiosity, because I am huge into Survivor. Have they ever been in touch with you since then? Any shot of returning or anything like that, or any other reality TV?
No, nothing like that. I mean, yeah, I've been approached for some like minor reality TV things that don't really make sense for me, but maybe I say this to protect my like own ego or whatever. But no, Jeff has never reached back out. I was obviously the second person voted off in my season, so a pretty minor character. But yeah, everyone always asked me if I'd go back and play, but I'm not sure I would. It was the novelty of the first time was just like so epic. I talk about it in the book, but I have no like ill will toward the Survivor creatives, Chaos Cast, Jatia, anyone else. Like, I made my own doing, and at 26, I had a lot of growing up to do. And I look back now and I just go, man, that was badass. Like, what a cool experience. Like, I think about like, big, like you said, Chad, 3% body fat, well-fed, like getting off that helicopter and just seeing like 50 different people from production, like Cliff Robinson. Like, I was a huge NBA fan. I was just blown away, dude. Like, that will always be one of the very best moments of my life. And that's what I really channel, not Jeff going, Garrett, you're the second one voted off, and my mouth is agape. It was almost like the Robbi thing was like part 2, like just total shell shock in both spots. And what's funny about it is in both of those spots, like I was just grilled online after too, So
Well, the good news is a few seasons later, my good friend and fellow poker pro Ronnie Barda went on Survivor and was the first one out. So you did
yeah.
better than Ronnie. And Mike and I we're trying to dip our toes into the reality TV. We have applied for The Amazing Race. So yeah, we'll see.
Nice. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Obviously, Maria and Tiffany those are your go-tos for Amazing Race strategy. But yeah, she doesn't do it anymore. But the casting director, long time forever, her name was Lynn for both shows. I mean, again, she doesn't do it anymore, so I can't help you. But she was like legend, dude. Like you went in the room, like I had a couple interviews specifically where it was just her, Jeff, and Lynn. I mean, this woman took like boss lady to like another level. Like I've never really like felt intimidated, but she was epic, and thankfully, like, she was on my side pretty quickly. But I just wanted to briefly touch on what you were talking about, with sobriety and weight loss. I mean, first, congratulations, that's amazing. Like I've seen some of your online posts. And yeah, I mean, they're obviously inspirational, but more importantly, like, I mean, just starting to make decisions each day that like allow one to feel better. That's kind of been like the journey of my life as well. I also used to be like a really heavy drinker and just made like a lot of self-destructive decisions. And I think in more recent years, I've kind of just figured out how to make choices that allow me to feel better the next day, the next week, things of that nature. And I think that's kind of what it's all about, like one day at a time, just figuring out, how to live with a bit more peace, how to stop being self-destructive, because it's never going to be like 0 to 100, and so that would be my only challenge to you, Chad, is like, if complete sobriety is the way for you, great. But also if in a few months from now you start drinking again, like do it in moderation, do it in small quantities. Like you're never going to eat perfect every bite of every meal every day. I assure you that won't work. As you know from my book, like that will only lead to binge eating and things like that. But if you can just slowly make strides in these things, that's kind of, I think that's all we can ever really ask of ourselves. And that mindset has helped me a ton. Instead of trying to be perfect at all things at all times and inevitably crashing and burning, instead patting myself on the back and taking the win whenever I make small steps, like I'm forgetting the word, but small progress, towards a given goal. So
yeah. I relate to that. You said in your book early on, especially your online poker career, where you would be playing, you would make one bad mistake and allow that to be an excuse to make many more mistakes. And I certainly went through that in my life, not necessarily with poker, even though there's been times I've punted because of it, but more so with just lifestyle and eating. Like I would eat bad and be like, well, this isn't a reason for me to eat bad tomorrow. And then the next day and the next day. I've gotten a lot better with, yes, I still mess up. I still will have those days where you eat bad or do something, but to get back on the horse, so to speak, a lot more quick, just the very next day and be like, yep, I messed up, but that doesn't mean I'm going to continue to do that. So,
Yeah. I discuss this in the book, these sort of on and off periods, I used to have. And I think one of the best sort of lessons I took away from, my therapeutic work was understanding that off Garrett, to oversimplify, this guy who laid in bed, ate everything in sight, like was lethargic, that guy was still part of me, right? For the longest time, I was like, I don't know that guy. Like, he just like invades my body sometimes, right? But by making peace with sort of all the aspects of who I am, so, all of us, like there's a dichotomy to who we are. All of us are capable of being productivity machines. All of us are capable of, treating everyone in our life wonderfully and maybe not so great sometimes, right? That if we can sort of accept and make peace with all of those aspects, there's nothing really to deny anymore. And that's where incremental is the word I was looking for. My goodness. That's where we can make incremental progress, towards a variety of goals we're trying to make. In your case, with food, in my case, tilting my balls off mid-session, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Before we get back to the book, I do want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, WPT Global, currently running satellites for the WPT Seoul which is coming to the Inspire Resort's brand new YY Poker Club, which opened just this month. It's Asia's newest major poker room, 70 tables, dedicated live stream studio as part of its brand new second floor entertainment space. There's going to be 46 events across 11 days, and that isn't going to include it's roughly a $700 buy-in championship event, $700,000 and guaranteed prize pools for that one. WPT Global currently offering satellites running right now until October 25th. Can qualify for as little as $1.10. And every Sunday, 3 $1,500 packages guaranteed in their $88 qualifiers. So check that out. I'll link to it in the show notes. I mentioned the book. Obviously, you can pick up a copy. I like a hard copy, so I've got one on pre-order. I did have the digital copy as well, so you can get it on Kindle. But you can also get an audiobook because I think I was reading you actually did the narration for the audiobook. Tell us a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah, the first thing I'll say about that is I've had to learn how to do 25 new jobs in the last few years, and for recovering perfectionists like myself, that was no picnic, so I was really terrified doing the audiobook. It's actually reasonably high stakes. They put you in this high-end studio, you got a couple sound engineers, it's this big thing, and so you kind of have to perform. You can't mess it up and do it again, or it's gonna cost another 20 grand or whatever. So I was pretty scared. Dialogue in audiobooks is pretty tricky, actually. You need to make sure it's different enough from the typical narration, but if you overdo it and you try to overact, you're just going to ruin your whole audiobook, So I think I kind of just ran hot there. Obviously I've listened to it back now. I think actually for an amateur audiobooker, narrator, whatever, I'm happy with how it came out, and there was just no way anyone but me could read it. I just could never rely on a professional actor to do it. Obviously, poker in itself is pretty niche and a bit of a foreign language, but I mean, man, there's just so much vulnerability and emotion behind so many of those words that I just feel like it would just be an opportunity lost to not read it myself. And obviously, I have an immense amount of pride in those words as well. So.
Yeah, I'm always a big fan when the author actually does the narration. I re-listened to Doyle Brunson's autobiography not too long ago, and it was great to just hear from him. Mike, what's your preference when it comes to these things? You like a hard copy of a book? You like reading on a Kindle? You like the audiobook? What's your choice?
I haven't read a book since 1991. No, I'm joking. Audiobook or hard copy, honestly. I've never really been a Kindle guy. I think I was honestly, when you announced that the book was on pre-order, I clicked so quickly, I literally think I might have been number 1 or number 2 once it was released. I was so fast to pre-order it. So it will be the first hard copy, because when it gets here, I will read it again. Obviously, I haven't read the middle sections. It's going to be the first hard copy book I've read in a year and a half, something like that. So I'm excited, very excited. And I do agree. I think you doing the audiobook, that's the only way to do it. Literally the only way.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think one note just on the audiobook that, the book's obviously written so it's accessible to a wide audience, but the physical book as well as the digital one, has a series of footnotes. It's got some additional fun little tidbits throughout, but a lot of it is just for poker novices to make sure that they can follow along with everything, So I would say if you're newer to poker or don't know the rules to poker, you can certainly still, I think, love the book. But those footnotes, in the physical or digital, form will be great. And yeah, there's a lot of sort of science behind, how it helps us to pick up a physical book and read those actual pages. With a 3 and a 1-year-old, it's hard for me. I'm a distance runner, so I'll admit at least some of my reading I get in with audiobook too, so I can multitask. But yeah, at night I always have a physical book to pick up as well. I think it's just a different experience.
The book itself is releasing on September 1st, and not to get too far ahead, because obviously we want that to be a big thing. We want people to order it, read it, but looking ahead, is there going to be more associated with this book coming down the pipeline, right? Because the story itself, your life story, it could make for a good movie, it could make for a good documentary, could make for a lot of things. Yeah.
I mean, I've been in touch with a few people about that. I think ultimately, I think a lot of people are in wait and see mode, especially with me. I think there's certainly some very legitimate question marks whenever someone whose career hasn't been a professional writer, will the book be any good? And So, that's obviously for the audience to see. Thankfully the first few editorial reviews have come in and, they've been glowing, and that means a lot. But I'm kind of in wait and see mode here too. There's opportunities, I think, for the book to kind of spur the next 5 big professional challenges that come my way, or not, so we'll kind of see. I'm actually, Chad, really kind of in a very peaceful place right now. I've just been like full sprinting for years straight. I think maybe people will find this hard to believe, but I've actually never worked harder in my life. Like, yes, I worked really hard at poker, but this has just been all consuming between the book and the course and the documentary style Jack 4 video and so many other jobs that it's nice to finally be slowing down now. And a lot of my work right now is doing stuff like this, like, which is not work at all, just chatting it up with you guys. And, I know things are about to change a lot in the next few days here. And so whatever it comes, like, I'm kind of at peace with it. I hope I'm ready for it, and my wife and I have had some pretty deep conversations about like, what is the goal of this project right when I started writing and every step along the way. And, I think I want in this order to entertain people and hopefully, be able to share something that can help them in their lives. I just have so much belief in this book that at this point, I don't think the jury is out whether I'm going to do that, at least for some people. And so in that way, I've already won. And, I come from a very metric obsessed, quantitatively focused world, not just in poker, but in my distance running and everything. I think as a lifelong poker player, it's hard for me to not hyper focus on numbers. And so I'm really working hard not to do that, with this, whether the book sells 10 or 20,000 copies or 10x that, hopefully I'm going to be at peace either way, because ultimately, I'm an artist now, as cliche as that sounds. And all you can do is put out the very best piece you can, and then let the cards fall where they may. And I know I've done the former. And so I'm hopefully prepared to kind of just see how it all plays out.
You did mention,
I think,
go ahead,
I was
Mike.
going to say, I think if 13-year-old Garrett saw what you've become today, he would be very proud and happy of his future. So I would be proud if I were you. And yeah, man, this is insane. And you're about to go through another explosion of people discussing things online and being back in the spotlight, because all the stuff that we talk about at the end of the book, I mean, this is going to be some interesting next few days for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited about, that part. I think we touched on this a little bit before, but what I think I'm prepared for and what I need to be prepared for is, whether, Mike, to your point, whether it's like 3-1, people think Robbi and company probably were up to no good, or it's more like 10 or 20-1. I need to just sort of be at peace with that, either way. And I think I'm ready, for that, but also it's hard because it took a long time to compile all of this. And you can imagine with the documentary style video coming out, like, I mean, that is just so much work. Like it is going to be hours long. And so how can you put that much time into any project or two and not be very emotionally invested? So we'll see how it plays out.
I do want to follow up on what you just said to those who might not know the documentary video that you just mentioned. What's that about, and what can people expect?
Yeah, I say documentary style because it's not, a documentary itself, but, that video, again, it's going to be several hours long ultimately. And its goal is focused entirely on the evidentiary aspects, right? So the first 9/10 of the book, it doesn't touch on at all. And even in the Jack 4 section, all the narrative details, sort of the reason behind all of the decisions I made, all the mistakes I made along the way, all the introspection analysis, it won't cover any of that. And it's still so long, right? It's just purely focused on evidence. And I think this really speaks to the complexity of the Jack 4 controversy. Like there is just, without this smoking gun where Brian just comes out and goes, yeah, we cheated, which even then probably wouldn't be enough for people, right? This guy's like obviously a convicted felon and has trouble with the truth, etc. Like, even then, like, yeah, you're not going to convince everyone. And so I think it was my responsibility to lay out, again, the mountain of circumstantial evidence in sort of the cleanest way possible in visual form, because that's going to be so much more powerful, especially to less seasoned poker players. And let them, do what they will with it. I think, and this is how I know, like, it's going to be tricky no matter what, like, obviously some assets have already been released already. And, some bigger names in poker, people with, reasonably powerful microphones have said, like, like Garrett doesn't have anything, like he would never wait 4 years or whatever the case. And it's like, I don't know, like none of that should bother me. Right. And yet I guess it makes me nervous because it's like, I just want people to give it a chance, basically, to either read through it, or if they want to wait several months later to watch through it and make up their own mind about it, And again, we're kind of talking about these evidentiary aspects a bit. A lot of people watching this don't care about that. They're much more interested in the rest of my career, my story, or even the rest of Jack 4, and obviously that makes up, 95, 97% of the book. So.
Well, Garrett, we do appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. If you're ever in Las Vegas when we're all there, we'll have to have you in the studio, do another follow-up in person. And in the meantime, people should, as this episode comes out, you still got a few days before the release of the book, Beneath the Cards. You can order it on Amazon, I believe also on your website. I think you can even get a signed copy from yourself there, right?
Yeah. I mean, my website just redirects to Amazon, but either way, you can just go to GarrettAdelstein.com. Amazon is the easiest place to get it. And then, from my link tree, Chad, you can put that in the description. You can get signed copies as well. So a really clean, easy way to do that. You can just buy it right from Premier Collectibles. So,
yeah. Awesome. Well, Garrett, I'm really looking forward to it. I've read the book. There will be a review that coincides with the actual release, so you can check that out on Poker News. Definitely will be sharing that. And then, Mike, once you get your hard copy and you get to read through it all, we'll have to get your take.
Absolutely. I mean, I read a good chunk of it. I mean, a good chunk of it, like 25% total, the front and the back. I'm very excited to read the rest of it. And great stuff, Garrett. Been looking forward to this for a long time and looking forward to having you on the show. So this is dream come true. So awesome. One of the best role models a poker player could ask for. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, of course. Well, I appreciate you guys having me. And Chad, you were always like really chill, but you asked me like many times in the weeks and months after Jack 4, and I declined every time. And I just want you to know, like, it wasn't personal. I declined for everyone because at that point I'd already made several missteps, and I was just so fearful anything I said publicly would just be scrutinized further and whatever. So this has been a long time coming for us to get to chat publicly, and I'm looking forward to being able to do it, several more times in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great to have you. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, give us the 5-star review, share the Poker News Podcast far and wide so we can get another 1,000 episodes. And of course, get your copy of Beneath the Cards by Garrett Adelstein. I'm Chad Holloway. For Mike and Garrett, until next week, we'll keep a seat open for you.